All right. Welcome to our last update meeting for 2018 for Kubernetes Contributor Experience. My name is Paris Pittman. I am a co-chair here and will lead this fine ship for today's call. I can't believe it's the last meeting. I feel like time has flown this year. But this is going to be a mostly condensed usual episode of our program. For those that are just joining, I did put our meeting notes in the chat. Please feel free to add your name under the attendee for December 19th, and we'll pop the recording link in this meeting note when we are done. So first things first, we do have a code of conduct. Please be excellent to each other. I'm going to try to monitor the chat. So if you have something, just raise your hand if someone else is talking, and then that will be awesome. Also, if we have any new contributors on the line right now, I'm looking at your faces. I think Matt is, Edouard, I think you've introduced yourself before, right? But Matt, do you want to introduce yourself to folks?
Yeah, sure. So hi, folks. Matt Jarvis. My day job is Director of Community at Mesosphere. And I've been looking for a while to get more involved with the Kubernetes community. And so I've been having some discussions with Paris about contributing some project management type activity to this SIG.
Awesome. And we will get into that in a second when we go into more detail. But thanks, Matt, so much for joining today. I know you are in the UK now, and jet lag. So thanks for joining. Let's see. Now, next, we usually go into some regular program updates. Those regular programs, for those that don't know, are our Thursday community update, meet our contributors, and office hours. Those are just reoccurring programs that this project owns, and we really don't have many updates because of the holiday season. We're not doing the Thursday community meeting until January, and I believe the hosts are actually already on board and everything's good there. I do need more volunteers for January 2nd, meet our contributors. So if you're free, contact me. I don't know which session that is. I'm going to find out right now. I think that might be the 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. That is like bright new year, bright new time. Yes, that would be the 7:30 a.m. session. And for those that don't know, that is like our upstream mentoring initiative. It's very similar to office hours, except for it's upstream questions that you would ask a mentor, like how to be an improver. And George is always looking for help for office hours, and that is exactly what you think it is. It's end user persona questions, and feel free to reach out to George if you would like to help out there. All right. So let's look at our project board. I have not looked at this since pretty much pre-KubeCon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everybody can see it. Everybody see it? All right. So I know we probably have a lot of things that are either in a blocked column just based off of people's time, especially now that KubeCon has winded down. And also we've got a lot of stuff in progress. So I wanted to start with blocked. Does anybody have anything that's blocked that they want to discuss with us right now or need any help with? Cool. All right. The issues that I have in here that are blocked are pretty much everything that has to do with mentoring right now, and that's because I am swamped, but I am taking this as a priority in Q1. This stuff has to do with pretty much mentoring process, things that we need to figure out, like how mentor A is going to collect mentor B or mentee B's information for setting up a calendar invite and things like that, and putting in those mechanisms. And then we are also in the middle of some stuff getting clarified from the steering committee as it relates to working group clarifications and things like that. And once we do, then we're going to update these files with some more information that the community can benefit from, like what SIGs are helping out what working groups are tied to what SIGs and things like that. So, all right. Is anybody else blocked on anything that is not an issue? Meaning not an issue in GitHub. All right, that's awesome. Now, let's do a quick stand up for stuff that's in the progress column. Not George, George isn't here. Josh, do you have anything going on right now that you wanted to talk about? No?
No, we just sent out the follow-up survey for the new contributor workshop. There's been, I mean, none of that's on cards at this point.
Yeah, I did put a, I did just put a card in for wrap up for Contributor Summit, and I did include your survey there, and I gave you some attribution as well. Yeah, I said 2 different surveys, separate one now that Josh Burkus has completed that one.
Yeah, so already looking at the responses, and I haven't gotten the responses from Shanghai yet, but and is Guinevere in the call?
No, she's officially off for the year. Rightfully so. Deservedly so, rather.
Because she's not going to want to hear that we need to revise, that we want to revise the content. So a couple of things have already come out of the responses that I've gotten. So 3 things. I mean, one is, we need to take a close look at the individual content because people did not find all parts of the workshop equally valuable. When I get also the responses from Shanghai, et cetera, we'll have a better overall idea of that. Second thing is one of the suggestions, and I think it's excellent, from Seattle was that we should look at having an intermediate training, like, hi, I'm already a Kubernetes contributor, how do I become a reviewer?
Yeah.
Now, creating the content for that could be quite difficult, but it is something that at least a few people are asking for, and it certainly lines up with our needs for the project overall.
That's exactly why we did the code review session with Daniel Smith this year. Okay. That like starting to get in that like learning of what it's like to be in a different role. Mm-hmm. Like Tim did it too when we had it on the Zoom recording, and we did the doc on like kind of how to do a code review. I think that's super, super important and awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could do this. We could have a workshop. I would actually prefer having sort of a track in the Contributor Summit where we just have 3 or 4 sessions that are aimed at that in general. Because among other things, at that point, it kind of depends on what direction somebody's going in. Somebody who's working in a feature SIG is going to be looking for different things than somebody who's working on docs. And then the third thing is we've had a number of requests for various versions of the new contributor content for people to use in meetups. And so I'm following up with those, and we'll want to eventually, when we've kind of got this all nailed down and have all the notes on it, we'll want to have like different versions of it depending on the audience and length.
All right. I have to stop my share because I don't even know what tab my, there it is, my tab, my project board was.
Can I just add a little bit of color around that? So I was in the new contributor summit, and I was also in Daniel's session on code reviews. And one of my questions to Daniel was, is any of that documented anywhere, like Kubernetes code style, API style, that kind of thing? I think he said there were docs, but it was a little bit out of date potentially. Mm-hmm. So that was one area that came out. And I think one of the areas that came out of the new contributor summit was, I think most folks were fairly familiar with GitHub and Flow. And I think maybe a little too much time was spent on how do I open a pull request, and not enough time was spent on specific Kubernetes type.
Yep. Bob and I actually discovered this too and presented the data to Gwyn because we saw that like people were coming from Docker and like industry related. So Bob and I were actually talking about like, let's do maybe like an intermediate new contributor track where instead of it being 5 hours, it's 2.5. We actually, someone from Google actually did that on Tuesday. He did a tutorial it was like a 2-hour tutorial from, it was kind of like building from source and doing your first PR. And it attracted like a lot of industry professionals and things like that. But I think there is a lot of value to the 5-hour format for a lot of people. We even have the data too. So I think that it just means we need to cater to yet another persona. Is that like another YAML acronym, yet another persona in Kubernetes. And the other good news on your feedback, John, is Edouard on the phone is actually revamping the dev guide. So that's going to be a huge, huge help for us. And that will be 2 personas, but the one that Edouard is mainly focusing on, and he can talk about this a little later, is the upstream developer. And then of course, persona number 2 being the developer that builds on top of Kubernetes. So awesome feedback, because this sounds like all the directions that we want to go into. So this is awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm just getting started. I've not really made any contribution yet, but reading the code base is a pretty big task in itself.
Yeah.
One of the things I would love, and one of the things that I would have loved, and I would love to contribute back when I get comfortable with it, is maybe, you know, video sessions or maybe document sessions, like tour of the code bases. Like, this is the API server. Here are the rough packages. Here are where things live. You know, not necessarily a line-by-line examination, but maybe just a package-by-package examination and correlating that to where some of the features live. So at least it's a little bit of a learning step for folks who want to go and find things. I mean, it's not going to be useful for expert programmers, but for someone like myself who's not a developer per se, but wants to contribute and can code, I think that kind of middle step would be pretty useful.
And good news, that's also being worked on. That's why we did the one session at the Contributor Summit. We also did a session on Meet Our Contributors, which is a monthly program that we do where if people want code-based tours, they can ask for them. And we did one on the Kubernetes, like a really quick 15-minute or so tour that Stitz did. The same one that actually did the API server walkthrough at the Contributor Summit. There's also an open issue too in the Kubernetes community that we set. Here, let me look at it. I will share my screen right now. Hold on. I think we are actually in progress on this one. Where is it? Code-based tours, or is it in the backlog? Hold on. Let's see. Here we go. Yep, code-based tours videos. So if as you're going through your journey right now and like looking through all the code bases and things like that, and if you're like, hey, I really want someone to explain this to me, do me a favor and come in here and write what you would like on the in a comment. And then that's awesome for us, because then what I can do is recruit those folks to do the thing. And then we can do it on like Meet Our Contributors, where we have like hundreds of folks watch that. And it's super helpful. Like, we're so in agreement with you that this is definitely something that we think we need at this point, especially with 190 repositories and so many of them relying on KK and other major utilities and things like that we have in those repos. So yes, all awesome suggestions for sure.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I'll watch that issue. Do you remember offhand which Meet the Contributor that it was that Stitz went through the?
Yeah, I will get that for you as we go through this in 1 second. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
The link to the video is in the issue also.
Oh, good.
Ah, okay. I'll look on the issue. Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is right here. I even did it. Duh. Duh. All right. So yeah, that's awesome. And I'll go ahead and move this over to in progress as well, because we have made some progress there, and I'll update the card when we get off the line. So yeah, we have a lot of stuff going on. And as Josh alluded to, in progress, I'll do a quick stand up. We are officially wrapping up the Contributor Summit. It is definitely feels like the song that doesn't end at this point. We've been working on it since July. But we are so at the home stretch, everyone. We are doing blog posts and emails and picture albums and YouTube recordings and all types of stocking stuffers for everyone that relates to the Contributor Summit. And all of that will be out by no later than beginning of January. Blog post season is sort of come and gone at this point, so we're going to wait until January 7th to get something out to folks for like a wrap-up standpoint. But just a really verbal summary of the Contributor Summit. It was awesome. We had 300, I think it was like early 300s attendees. That was roughly, I think, 89% of the folks that said they were going to come, said they were going to come. Bob, back me up on that. Is that accurate?
It was 89% of current contributors that showed up.
89% of current, it was 83% of total that showed, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. I knew there was an 83 number in there. And then we had, 35 total sessions. All recordings are in YouTube. Verbals that we've received was that the content was great because we did cater to multiple personas. But we are sending out a survey, so we will have hard data on things like that here within, I'd say, by mid-January. And then we can start chiseling out what the next year's Contributor Summit stuff looks like and strategies. So we'll probably set an issue shortly here to get things kicked off for strategy plannings and things like that. We are going to have a conversation with CNCF in mid-January as well as it relates to budget and who does what and responsibilities and what exactly contributor experience does in this process, like what do we own, et cetera. So that'll also help us with planning activities in the future as well. So that's my stand-up. That's most of the stuff that I've been working on. Bob, did you want to do a stand-up really quick about the style guide?
Sure. At this point, it's pretty much done. Just need to clean up some of the language. I'll link the HackMD sort of working one right now.
Yeah, I can get that up too.
There. These are essentially augmented style suggestions from the main Kubernetes docs and taking other suggestions from like how GitLab, Google, and a bunch of other groups handle their documentation and should help sort of firm up how we handle technical documentation within the community repo. So this is more so for like the developer guide, contributor guide, and some of that content. And we'll also sort of give all our pages that are going to wind up eventually on the contributor site a nice like sort of uniform feel.
Does anybody have any questions about the style guide or anything like that? I know that's sort of new to our conversation, so I just wanted to see if folks understood why we were doing that. Just a quick TLDR, we did a contributor site, surface some docs and realized with Netlify and realized that, wow, like some of our docs are meant to be hidden because we don't have great grammar. So this style guide is just going to help us do better as it relates to what our docs should look like inside of this community repo. So when we surface them on contributor sites and things like that, that we don't have to do a ton of work to make them web friendly. They'll kind of already be like that, just like our doc set is on the technical side. So,
do you want any help with that?
Yeah, I think Bob's like pretty much done and going through edit phases with the docs team right now, but we could always use other sets of eyes. Bob, do you want to update the issue with what you've got? And then,
sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just whatever your latest is, and then maybe ping Josh. Josh.
If you want to take a look, it's linked in Zoom chat, the HackMD doc.
Oh, let me look. Where's my chat? Here we go, chat. I'm gonna pull it up right now. Here we go. And again, this would be just for the community repository. Cool, looks good, Bob. Yeah, like I'm looking at some of these and I break these myself.
Oh yeah, I've broken a lot of them myself.
Yeah, so what we should also do then is we should probably do some kind of, I hate to say the word training, but not training, but like maybe we should dedicate like 30 minutes of our meeting just to go over like some of the stuff in the style guide for people that write regular docs in our repo. Like I know I write a lot of docs and I know Josh and other people do too. So it would be good just to like go through the stuff, maybe the stuff that we just routinely break. I mean, I know I can probably pick up stuff to talk about. So
The other thing is it's a pretty good, like if you want a good first issue to assign to people just beyond like, fixing some links or something like that, they can take sort of the firm guidelines and, outside of correcting any sort of spelling mistakes, also like update older documentation to it.
All right, I'm going to write on the issue that, can I include the HackMD link? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Anyone that's signed into GitHub can make like suggestions and things like that, but we can see
All right.
all the revisions will be there.
All right, and then I'll do that in a second.
So Paris originally asked if anybody had any questions on why. I don't, but comment. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah. And I know Bob has been working hard on this as well, so this is awesome. And then on that same breath, if you will, there is a card in here for content strategy. In that same breath, when we realized, wow, our docs aren't that great, when we were surfacing them in Netlify, we also realized like, wow, we actually don't have to surface all of these docs because like, it's kind of like reading the fine print to a product for some of the docs. Not everybody is going to need to read them at any given time. So why don't we just give them the resources and things like that. So this content strategy, we're getting sort of a little, I'm saying working group in quotes, meaning this isn't like, we're not PRing into SIG YAML that we're having a working group. This is just within our little crew. A little birds of a feather crew on contributor strategy for this and content strategy. This would just be us doing focus groups, looking at data that we already have, maybe collecting data from other sources, whatever it is, on what exactly would benefit this community the most, meaning this contributor community, to surface docs. We already know things like calendar, KEPs. Those are just the things that we already knew that we had set the KEP for, and KEP being Kubernetes Enhancement Proposal. So we definitely have a lot of work to do here, but at the same time, I think we have enough people to where we're going to be able to chunk this work out. And like, one person does a few focus groups with the same questions, and then we really suss out what's needed here. So super pumped about that. I've done some content strategies in the past. So this is going to be dusting off my cobwebs for content, and we'll kick that up next year. George is going to be making some changes to the KEP when he comes back too, so that we can rework that. And then Matt, that actually is a really good segue into you, because as we're reworking the KEP, one of the things that we want to make sure of is like what done means. Because this is where I think we as contributor experience need the most help with, like in project management terms, because like you can see we have this big humongous board. And we do obviously have a complete section, completed. But we don't necessarily have a definition of what done is here. And we don't necessarily have definitions on like what we had talked about, like how long, like what an engineering hour is, or an engineering day rather, and some of those things. So
yeah, I mean, I've just been taking a dig while you've been talking into some of these issues on here, and I mean, it looks to me like a lot of them are very large, yes, overarching things which aren't actually broken down into here are the kind of tasks that this breaks down into. And I guess, you know, I mean, again, this is only based on a very brief look at this board, but you know, like we talked about in Seattle, there's kind of a difference between the aspirational kind of here's what the end goal of something is, to here are the steps by which we get there. And I guess at the minute it kind of feels like there's those two things are sort of mixed in this board. Is that a fair assessment of?
That's a 100% fair assessment.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did put a call out on the contributor role board for a project manager for those that are like, what the heck's going on right now? And quite a few people responded. So many, actually, I think over 10 people had DM'd me. And it just got to a point where I was like, everybody come to KubeCon and let's just meet there, kind of thing.
And 9 of them didn't turn up apart from me.
and now we have Matt. I mean, Eeyore is still very interested. He actually pinged me and said that he was going to follow up with this video, and then also probably follow up with you too personally, Matt.
Okay.
So I actually asked quite a few people to see like if we could just do this project management thing together, and start to really suss out like what our milestones are. I think our milestones should be KubeCons, not necessarily releases, because we can ride the press on KubeCons for the stuff that we do in contributor experience, and all the awesome stuff that should come out maybe like at contributor summits and things like that, instead of releases, because we don't go in the change log. So like who actually has seen our communications and like what we do in that kind of summarized format. So we can probably like publish blog posts and stuff about it around KubeCon time. That's sort of where my head is right now about like milestone planning and stuff like that. Does anybody like disagree and think that we should go with releases? This was something I've had in my head for a minute that I haven't like actually gotten out verbally. But I just feel like with everything that we do for contributor summits, which are at KubeCons, well, and Cloud Native Cons, and maintainer track there, and there's tons of other opportunities there to get the word out. What do y'all think? Matt, what do you think about that? Do you think that's like...
Yeah, well, I mean, as we discussed in Seattle, I think it's always useful to have some kind of bounding to what you're trying to do, and that then you can plan your resources against. You know, in some ways you could, you know, having it's quite easy, I think, in this kind of stuff to end up with 20 or 30 and a growing list of stuff that you never quite get to the end of. And, you know, it's probably more effective to have some idea of what velocity you're capable of achieving and actually say, you know, within these bounds, we would actually like to achieve X, Y, and Z, rather than having A to Z and going part way along all of them. You know, I think it makes people feel better, you know, who are contributors, who are helping out, to have things actually complete. You know, I think psychologically it can be quite wearing to have lots and lots and lots of projects that make some progress but never actually reach the end. You know, I mean, this is obviously all just my personal opinion, but, you know, I mean, so, and if you want to have things that complete, you know, then having bounds and having an idea of what resource you've got within those bounds is always going to be a useful approach.
So do you have any questions or even concerns with anything about getting a little bit more tighter around project management here?
I think it's a good thing overall.
Yeah, I know it's a scary word, but I used to think to myself, like, when I, you know, would work at like in big PMOs and stuff like that, like, but now that it's just like we do whatever it's kind of thrown at us. Now I'm like, project manager.
There's so much that we're trying to accomplish as a SIG, and it's easy for it to just sort of bumble along as the SIG members have time, and having some prioritization and clarity, better description of the tasks will make it a lot easier for us to scale.
Yeah. And another thing too, Matt, that I don't know if we talked about it or not, or if we covered it when we talked in Seattle, but we do have so much data. Like that's one thing that I feel this year we did accomplish that we did not have, that we haven't really talked about, is that we have so much of it. Like we have feedback data for so many contributor summits. We have a survey that we did for 160 people that are all levels, and we even asked them what they think our priorities should be. So it's like how can we? I mean, I have so many ideas, so it's not like a how. It's not like an open-ended how. It's just like a how can we actually logically put that in place, and then also include that in our project management so that we can weight it. And I don't mean the word weight by like making up numbers either.
Yeah.
Just like weighted as far as like, oh, that, like, for instance, the highest priority, of course, like everybody thinks is mentoring. So it's like, how do we make all of our mentoring stuff like the highest priority? Which, as you can see, it's blocked for the most part. So it's clearly not a priority at this point. So like, how do we just need to figure out how we can get this set up so that those priorities bubble up to the top.
Yeah, and I guess you have to also make some hard choices, Paris. You have to say no to things and say that's not, because that's the essence of making priorities, is that you have to drop things off the bottom, right? Because I mean, clearly here, looking at everything that's in this board right now, I mean, I don't know how big the regular contributor pool is, but I mean, there could be 3-person years of work in this board. There's a rough looking at it, right now. I mean, which when you add things in at the top every cycle, that that's just like, an endless elastic thing that you can never get to the bottom of. So I guess well, there's a whole bunch of questions, I suppose, that are hopefully going to work themselves out at some point. I mean, I'd like to take a look through each of the things that are in this board at the minute and work out kind of what has been broken down into tasks already and what is just an aspirational goal. And then look at sizings in GitHub is pretty difficult to do from what I know of doing that kind of Scrum-based stuff in GitHub, because I think you can. Some folks do it with labels. I think there is some SIGs in Kubernetes already using label sizing in GitHub as a indication of the size of a particular issue.
I believe so.
Yeah, because you do it with labels, I think. But but then there are there's a bunch of other tools out there that you can use, right? And I guess then that's another question as well. Is this the right tool for what you're trying to do with it? There's Trello, there's Jira, there's all sorts of, there's a ton of different project management tools that do that kind of stuff. And there's a bunch of stuff you can strap on top of GitHub as well. So yeah, there's lots of options there at the minute. I'm just trying to think of the kind of way of a potential start point. And I guess the start point really is for me to spend some time looking through what you've got on the board at the minute, and with a totally cold, kind of cold start to say, well, I don't, if I can't see that what the road is for something to get to the point where you could say it's done, then that probably means that task needs breaking down into something. And perhaps it's actually good that I'm completely cold to this and don't understand the content of some of these things, because do you understand what I mean? That having that cold set of eyes on it, I can kind of be quite. I'm not emotionally involved with any of these things right at the minute, so I can kind of say, well, I don't get what the output of that is. So, and
then, not to sound meta, but file an issue. Let other folks know. Let's start to let other folks know in the community that this is officially being worked on. Like I said, I already did file the contributor role board thing, and so like let's just get this kind of officially kicked off if that's cool. And I guess feel free to put like your first steps in there. We can all communicate via that. You can come back to these meetings at any time. You can Slack with us questions. If you want to set up a completely separate meeting relating to kicking off project management, we can do that, and I can make it public. Let me know how you think like we should.
Yeah, I mean, let me take a run at it. Clearly we're getting into holiday season right now. So I'm probably I'm probably going to be out of circulation for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So let me take a look at it in January.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll file an issue against this project as a kickoff tracking thing, and hopefully have come back to this group in January with some thoughts once I've had a chance to poke at things. Does that sound like a reasonable start?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I can't promise that there's magical bullets that are going to solve all your problems either, right? I mean, we don't work in that kind of world, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it'll help us not pull out hair, and I think simple is better here, and that's definitely something that we discussed too.
Yeah.
I don't think we need full-blown Scrum. I think talking more and getting us just in the habit of communicating out is something that's extremely beneficial to our SIG. And yeah, so I think
great.
The smallest of done, like defining what done is.
Yeah, and that's my absolute approach as well, is that, there's no point in over-egging the pudding with these things. I think even to have, a voice saying, how long do you think this might take and what are the steps by which you get there is hopefully, maybe a step further than what we've got at the minute, right? So, if I can be that voice and, be the hard one who everybody wants to beat with the stick, then, if it's helpful. So what would be helpful to me is, to have everybody's thoughts on, what are the pain points? What are we trying to solve for here? Because, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of ways you can go about this. So, the more thoughts on from this group on what are the pain points from that perspective would also be very useful to me in starting to think about it.
Yep, I can definitely give you those for sure.
Yeah.
Even today. So
great.
Yeah. Maybe we can start like a little mailing list thread too, and that would kick off an issue when you get back. I'll think about that. All right. Does anybody have any other questions for in relation to project management stuff going on or Matt? All right.
And just one last question on that, Paris. So this GitHub board is where everything is happening, right? There isn't any other place where stuff is happening outside of it.
Yeah, that's just capturing issues.
Right.
So, and yeah, there's the whole other thing, which is PRs. So because some of our PRs are reactionary and don't have issues or catching spelling errors or what have you that aren't related to an issue. So, but that's it. That's correct.
Okay, cool.
I'm trying to we're trying to foster that culture where everything is going through issues, but when it comes to, as you know, community management topics, it's hard to set issues for Slack channels and stuff like that. So a lot of the very heavy transactional stuff that we do with this SIG isn't captured in GitHub. So maybe P99 is another thing of how do we track stuff that track and report on activity that we have that isn't in GitHub. So that might be something else to kind of think about as well.
Yeah.
So does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last call for questions related to PM, and then we're going to move on to Dev Guide. All right. Thank you, Matt. Edouard, do you want to share your screen, or I can share mine too if you want to just talk through it and show folks the doc that you created for the revamp, and then give everybody a little update?
Yeah, I can share the screen.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll go to my end.
Okay. Basically, in this document, I was writing stuff that I will put in an issue. I'm gonna create a new umbrella issue for the dev guy. And basically, I was writing a skeleton. The main purpose of this skeleton is to change a little bit the main README. What is this? Okay, we have this table of contents, and I think I as a developer, we need a little bit more information here. We have just links to the files and some information here, but we can develop this a little bit more. And I was building something like this. First, we have things that people need to know before building. Okay, we have number one as prerequisite. I don't know how to say that in English, but those are common points that will have the two personas that we will be getting in consideration for the guy. But for the next 2.5 months, I will be working just in persona one. Persona one is the developer that we will work on the Kubernetes repo. So we have all these common points for persona one and persona two, and then we have for persona one all these points. And I want you can read this and then give me some feedback. And if you think that something is not gonna help us here, just taking away from here. And I think for now, I just need that kind of help from you, because for today later, or maybe tomorrow morning, I'm gonna be taking this and creating a new issue on GitHub. And what do you think? I can share this document with all of you.
Anyone have any comments? I think it's an awesome start. I know Nikita's already commented. I know I had forwarded this to Phil Whitrock because he's been super interested in getting a dev guide kicked off. Same with Tim on the line. Josh, what do you think? I feel like you have some opinions here.
I think it's fine. It's it's a matter of actually getting everything written, which will take us quite a while.
Yeah. I think that's the largest chunk of work, Edouard, is once you have this kind of skeleton outline set, is filling it in. And then I think don't you have the inventory list? Do you want to scroll all the way down to the bottom?
Yeah.
So the other thing that Edouard is working on is just doing an inventory of the actual develop folder, what's in there, and like if it should be in there, if it should be linked somewhere else, because there is some like general contributor stuff in there as well that maybe should be surfaced on the contributor guide, and really thinking about that. So that's a part of the next step that he's going to undertake is that.
I have a couple of questions about what I'm doing with the inventory. The first is, how can I identify when a document has to be updated? Because there is no information in there. How can I identify that it has to be updated, or if it has to be removed from the repo or put it in another repo?
I have a couple of different ways, I think. One way is looking at the age of the doc. Kubernetes feels like it changes daily at this point. And I think if the doc has been sitting there for, I feel like a good assumption is like, I don't know, longer than what, 3 cycles or 3 releases maybe, that there is a good chance that we should read this doc and get someone else to read it, maybe like the author of it, and say, what do you think? Is this doc stale? If you don't know the material yourself, for instance. And then if you do have any other doubts, you can always go to the author of the document or whoever did it last. Or if it's an API related doc, you know that you can go to the API machinery folks. Like the Slack channel is probably awesome for that kind of discussion. And then you can always also ask us in our contributor experience Slack chat as well. And we'll read it and someone will bound to have an opinion. That's the good thing with the DevVel guide is that a lot of folks have a lot of opinions. So you're bound to get somebody with an answer. And does anybody else have any other tidbits for Edouard on like how to see if these docs are stale?
I agree with what Paris has said, and I wouldn't worry so much about that at first. As you're working through the organization and trying to kind of work out from your skeleton, as you're exploring, I think you're going to be asking people questions. Like each of these docs in the current inventory, they have a Git history, for example. There's people that you can reach out to through that to say like, hey, is this up to date? But then also your initial reviewers, as you're building this out, will have some sense as well. And my hope is that because this is open source and people are used to collaborating, that you start getting some kind of organic contributions that, if nothing else, are like, hey, this one's out of date. And maybe that's something you might want to just explicitly have in the description is, if you see something here as you're reviewing, let me know. And going back to the earlier project management discussion, then it becomes a task to find the people who can better update.
Yeah, another thing you could do too is as you're doing the inventory and kind of doing a TLDR of what the doc is and what the purpose of the doc is, like for instance, I see that you've already started that on your doc. One thing you could do is like lump some of the docs together, like for instance, like API stuff. And then maybe link all of them and then send to the API machinery mailing list and say, does anyone on here think that I should focus my time on updating these docs? So then you can maybe get people in one big swoop. That might be a good way to do that as well if you feel like the other way is going too slow. Because that's my thing. And there's just so many docs in this folder that I worry if we're going to go one by one, just like what kind of Tim's alluding to too, is like we might not necessarily have to go that granular. But that could be a good idea. That could be a good approach.
Another option there, kind of going top down, is to just assume they're all bad. Like,
yeah.
not to like put like a negative spin on it, but if you just start out assuming that they are all stale, sometimes it's better to throw things away in bulk. We still have them in the Git history, but starting from a clean slate might give a more coherent guide.
Yeah, I see. Exactly. And if you are bulking them up, like for instance, all API stuff, all architecture stuff, kind of in that mindset, you might be able to get a couple of combo docs out of it, where it might make better sense to have a combo doc than like a one doc, or maybe you see like a doc that should be split. So that could be a good way in like your head to do the architecture of the docs as well. Hope that made sense.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to add that, like, if you just want to start off with something, there are a few issues in the Kubernetes community repo, which say, hey, this doc is stale, or this doc needs improvement. So maybe you could just start there. Like, for instance, I know the testing related docs are stale. So you could probably work with the SIG testing folks, who are super friendly, by the way. And you could probably just start there.
Yep, and that's another grouping of docs testing. So like testing architecture, API, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm so happy about this, y'all. I just wanted to say that publicly. This is so great and needed. Edouard, thank you so much. Do you have any other questions that we can help you with right now? Or are you just ready to dig in?
I have another question.
Sure.
For example, here, this document, adding an API group. If I go there, it is reference to another document. This is because there are other documents that still have this as the main one, adding an API.
That's a tombstone.
Yeah.
Usually, if you click on raw there, since you're screen sharing, the raw button kind of middle right? Yeah. It doesn't. Often inside the markdown is a hidden comment that doesn't render, will be a note saying, remove this file by such and such time in the future.
Mm-hmm.
This one may be old enough, it hasn't been modified in a year. It may be old enough to kind of predate us realizing we needed to make those little reminders, and it's probably a sign that it's ready to get removed. But we can also do things where we scour the repo at least a little bit and make sure that anything that was referring to this page gets pointed to the newer one.
Okay.
I also like that approach. So if you want to just keep that as a note to yourself, and keep moving, that maybe we can look at that and maybe remove other instances where that doc would be called, and then just delete it. Oh, where's our style guide, Bob? Style guide would be a good style guide suggestion would be to what Tim just mentioned.
The tombstone?
Yeah, about not tombstone, but about like having a hidden comment that says like, if this is still there, then
that's in there.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Woo. All these style guide references today. All right. What else, Edouard?
That's it for now.
Yep. Stylings. Yeah. All right. That's kind of all we had on the agenda today. Does anybody have any other discussions that they wanted to kick up? We have a lot of work going on.
Actually, a quick thing, if you want to use something to try and find references to, like if you're going to delete something and you want to find files that reference that doc, that there lets you search over like essentially all the repos for text.
Yep, and I just used that for the same reason, and it was awesome.
Same here.
It was so like I was trying to figure out what I was killing as far as a tombstone. So I was like, "Ooh, this is great."
So I'm utterly failing this morning, but does somebody have a handy doc that they know has a tombstone with one of those comments in to show, Edouard?
We have an example set of text. I don't know of an example tombstone right now. I just got to find it quick.
I'm about to just search for commits from Aaron Krickenberger that are .md files.
Oh yeah. I'm looking too. Sorry for the silence. I think a lot of us were looking.
This is a good sign if
There
we're
we go.
not finding, because we used to have like 100 of them not all that long ago.
Yeah. This isn't like at the bottom, it is an example file, but it includes sort of what the header looks like.
And all of this stuff that's in this file is going to be in the style guide, right?
Yep.
Okay,
It's,
so what we should do also is remove this file when we do the style guide. All right, cool. Sorry, I was kind of talking to myself. All right, Edouard, thank you again so much. That's awesome. We are going to be seeing you for the next 2+ months, so I'm sure we will talk again. Anyone have any last minute things? Last call. Tim, Nikita, Josh, Elsie, Matt, Bob. I think that's a wrap. Oh, Edouard, there, grab a link before we end the chat, though. Edouard, there's a link in there that Tim just gave you. All right. But for everybody else, that is it. Thank you so much for everything that you've done this year. We have an awesome community because of you. And let's go on to 2019 with full steam and a plate full of work. Thanks, everyone.
Ooh, go team
Bye.
go.
Yeah.
Have a great holiday.
happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, folks. See you
Thank
next
you.
year.